Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine the most sparsely populated territory on Earth. We're talking vast ice sheets, remote beauty, and suddenly it's at the absolute center of a major geopolitical storm.
It really is. We're talking about Greenland, of course.
And specifically, this really surprising and, frankly, aggressive push for the United States to acquire it.
It's a perfect example of how a place that seems so isolated can become a flashpoint for global politics. Our sources all confirm that President Donald Trump's statements about the need to own Greenland have just ignited a huge diplomatic firestorm.
And not just with Denmark.
Not at all. With Denmark, which is Greenland's sovereign nation, but also with key NATO allies, it's a real crisis.
So the core of this, and the focus of our deep dive today, is really analyzing that rationale for U.S. ownership. The administration is openly talking about buying this semi-autonomous territory from Denmark.
It goes even further than that.
It does, and this is the shocking part. The White House has not ruled out annexation by force, and the reason? Trump says the U.S. needs to own it to stop Russia and China from getting it first.
And that decision, to go from these existing agreements to demanding outright ownership, that's the critical point of friction here.
Right.
The difference between having influence through a partnership and demanding absolute control, well, carries a huge geopolitical cost. Our mission today is to really get into the U.S. security arguments and the powerful unified rejection they triggered.
Okay, let's start right there with this philosophy of ownership, because it moves way past just having military access, which, as we'll get into, the U.S. already has in a big way,
Right.
to demanding full territorial control. What do our notes say about the specific language being used to justify this?
Well, the underlying logic is all about permanence. It's about defensibility, or as he would say, having something tangible to defend. He specifically rejected the deals that are already in place.
He said things like 9-year deals or even 100-year deals aren't good enough.
Exactly. For the administration, those arrangements are just not robust enough to handle modern threats where, adversaries are always testing the boundaries.
He was quoted responding to a BBC question on this, saying, countries have to have ownership, and you defend ownership, you don't defend leases, and we'll have to defend Greenland.
That really does sound less like a diplomatic proposal and more like a real estate ultimatum, doesn't it?
Yeah.
One that's tied directly to military doctrine.
It does, and it completely reframes the U.S. relationship with both Denmark and NATO. He sees ownership as the only way to keep specific adversaries out.
And he wasn't subtle about who those adversaries are.
No, not at all. He used some very colorful language telling reporters, I love the people of China, I love the people of Russia, but I don't want them as a neighbor in Greenland. Not going to happen.
And he called out the alliance directly.
He did. And by the way, NATO's got to understand that. It's almost like he's trying to force the alliance to accept his unilateral vision for the Arctic.
And those statements are a huge point of tension because they depend on an amplified threat level. While he's insisting Greenland is vital to U.S. national security, our research shows he also claimed, and this is a key part, without providing any evidence, that Greenland was already covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place.
So he's creating this rhetorical link, exaggerating the immediate threat to justify this extreme measure of, buying it or just taking it.
It's essential to amping up the urgency.
And this isn't a totally new idea. He did make an offer to buy the island back in 2019.
He did. And he was told very clearly that it was not for sale. But the methods being floated now are much, much starker.
So the ultimatum that's been presented is basically the easy way or the hard way. And the White House confirmed they would not rule out annexing the island by force.
That language alone, just suggesting the military acquisition of a NATO ally's territory, that's what turns this from a strange negotiation into an immediate international crisis.
But hold on, if military action could mean the end of NATO, as Denmark later warned, how is that even a viable option? It seems like a huge paradox.
It's the central paradox of the whole thing. The goal is supposedly to enhance security against rivals, but the method proposed annexation would instantly destroy the main security alliance, NATO, that's designed to contain those very rivals.
So the analysis suggests they think the strategic gain in the Arctic is worth the diplomatic blowback.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
That it might outweigh the short-term damage to the alliance.
Wow. Okay, that sets up a perfect transition. If the argument is all about necessity, let's look at what the U.S. already has in Greenland, because it makes this push for ownership seem, well, a little redundant.
Absolutely. The U.S. security presence there is historical, it's deep. The U.S. has operated the Patuxent base.
Which most people still call Thule Air Base.
Exactly, Phil. On the northwestern tip of the island, ever since World War II.
And Patuxent isn't just some small, forgotten outpost. It has a critically important function, which, helps explain the high level of interest.
It's all about location, location, location. Patuxent is a key piece of the U.S. Global Early Warning Defense Network. It's perfectly positioned to monitor for ballistic missile attacks coming over the North Pole.
Historically from the Soviet Union, now Russia.
Right. It also tracks things in space. It monitors ships in the region. The base is basically the northernmost line of defense for North America.
And we should really emphasize that the current agreements with Denmark are extremely permissive. Even without ownership, the U.S. can bring in as many troops as it wants.
Pretty much, yeah. They can conduct whatever operations they deem necessary for their defense. So strategically, the military access is already there. It's deeply embedded and largely unconstrained.
Which brings us back to that core question.
Right.
Why risk the entire alliance for outright ownership?
And the answer seems to be in the two-pronged value of Greenland today. Its unchanging geography and its rapidly changing geology.
All thanks to climate change.
Exactly.
So, beyond the military side, what does this all mean for the island itself? Why is this huge, empty territory such a strategic prize right now?
Well, the geography, as we said, is priceless for those early warning systems. But the economic factor is becoming more and more important. The melting ice from global warming is, ironically, making Greenland much more desirable.
It's turning it from just a defense outpost into a potential resource hub.
A huge resource hub. And a hub that competitors like China and Russia are definitely paying attention to.
Which feeds right back into Trump's concern about them getting a foothold. So tell us more. What's actually under all that melting ice?
The mineral wealth is just staggering. According to geological surveys, they point to these vast deposits that are now becoming economically viable to actually mine because the ice cover is retreating.
And we're talking about things like rare earth minerals, right?
Specifically rare earth minerals, which are absolutely critical for modern tech, everything from batteries for electric cars to advanced guidance systems for weapons.
Right. The very materials that China currently dominates the global supply chain for. Securing a new source would be a massive strategic win for the U.S.
A huge win. And the list goes on. Beyond rare earths, there's a lot of interest in uranium, vast reserves of iron. Scientists also think the island could be sitting on major untapped oil and gas reserves.
So you have this convergence of new shipping routes opening up, strategic geography for defense, and what sounds like a mineral gold mine.
That's what's put Greenland squarely in the middle of this geopolitical storm. The island is shifting from just a strategic outpost to a critical resource supply line. And that's amplifying the desire for permanent control.
And that desire for unilateral control has been met with, well, a very unified and a very loud no.
A resounding no.
So let's pivot to those political consequences, the diplomatic front.
This rejection is just so powerful because it's coming from every direction. From the territory itself, from the sovereign nation, and from the entire allied community. That gives the resistance enormous weight.
The Greenlandic party leaders, and this includes the opposition, they issued this powerful joint statement that really just cuts to the heart of it.
It really does.
They said, quote, "We do not want to be Americans. We do not want to be Danes. We want to be Greenlanders." I mean, that's about as definitive as you can get.
It reinforces that clear message that the future of Greenland must be decided by the Greenlandic people. And they made a direct appeal calling for the U.S.'s disregard for our country to end. This isn't just refusing a sale, it's defending their basic right to sovereignty.
And the fallout just immediately escalated to Copenhagen. Denmark, as the sovereign power, issued this really severe warning about what U.S. military action would mean.
They drew a line in the melting ice, so to speak.
What were the specific ramifications they threatened?
Denmark warned the U.S. that any military action against its territory would mean the end of the Transatlantic Defense Alliance. It would mean the end of NATO.
The end of NATO itself, that's the highest possible stakes.
Absolutely. They made it crystal clear that the alliance could not survive one member annexing the territory of another.
And the U.S. wasn't just facing Denmark alone in this, were they?
Oh no, not at all. The reaction was swift and it was collective. Major European countries, Canada, they all immediately rallied to Denmark's support. And that unity was critical.
Why was it so critical?
Because it made defending Greenland's sovereignty a collective NATO position, not just some, bilateral argument between Washington and Copenhagen.
And what was the collective message from those allies? What was the common ground they established?
They all reaffirmed that only Denmark and Greenland can decide on matters concerning their relations. And crucially, while they all agree on the need for strong Arctic security, they stressed it has to be achieved collectively.
And they invoked international law.
They did. They explicitly called for upholding the core principles of the UN Charter sovereignty, territorial integrity, the inviolability of borders. They're basically using the bedrock of the entire post-World War II international system to push back.
And that grounding in international law makes the U.S. annexation threat seem so much more volatile. We also shouldn't overlook the emotional toll this is taking on the people of Greenland.
That human perspective is so important.
Our notes have a quote from a Greenlander who said, "The takeover threats makes me feel sick to my stomach."
And you can understand why. The threat felt very real to them. The source material points out that these concerns resurfaced right after the U.S. had recently used military force against Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro.
So the threat of doing it the hard way felt very potent because of recent U.S. actions elsewhere.
It felt very plausible, yes.
So we're left with the standoff. The U.S. argues unilateral ownership is the only way to guarantee national security versus Greenland, Denmark, and all their NATO allies arguing for collective security built on respect for sovereignty.
It's a classic confrontation. A realist view of power, if you own it, you control it, versus an institutionalist view where security is best achieved through alliances and agreements.
So what's the immediate next step? What should we be watching for diplomatically?
Well, we know U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is scheduled to hold talks with Denmark next week. That meeting is going to be the first major diplomatic test.
A test to see if the U.S. backs down.
Exactly. To see if they step back from this idea of forced ownership, or if they keep pushing the issue and risk destabilizing the alliance even more.
So if we connect all this back to the bigger picture, this whole deep dive really started because the current U.S. administration rejected these long-standing agreements, saying absolute ownership was essential for national security.
Right, to guard against China and Russia.
Meanwhile, every other NATO ally is insisting that security in the Arctic must be collective and must respect Danish and Greenlandic sovereignty.
Which leaves you, our listener, with a really important final question to think about. Given that the U.S. already has robust military access and is part of this collective defense alliance, can true security in the modern Arctic really be achieved through unilateral ownership?
Especially when that ownership would mean alienating a trusted ally and violating the foundational principles of the very alliance designed to keep the West secure in the first place.
The answer to that question is going to define not just the future of an island, but maybe the stability of the entire transatlantic architecture.